Good morning, respected audience, which may consist of students, teachers, other stakeholders in legal education, other stakeholders in internationalization of higher education, and the most esteemed Bar Council of India Trust's office bearers and Bar Council of India's office bearers. Welcome one and all to this session, which is going to unveil before you the concept of internationalization of legal education. Now, I'm going to present in the context of a lot of developments, especially post-1995 development in the sense of globalization, where we have come to a point where we cannot think of a legal system as nation-centric. So I would be unveiling before you a few stories of the people who got influenced by this new approach in terms of internationalization of higher education and internationalization of legal education in particular. First of all, I've got a story of a lady law professor who visited us by virtue of the memorandum of understanding we have had with the International Association of Law Schools, which has got more than 190 member law schools across the world, across all the continents. And this scholar, Professor Claire, had to say that during COVID-19, with the sudden first lockdown, how she was cut off from everything and how she had to suddenly change her plan. But she was so happy for the formidable way in which we cooperated with her, and she was kept counseled, she was kept talked to. The second story is about one of our professors, Professor Upal, who found these opportunities of internationalization of higher education in symbiosis and internationalization of higher education in particular in her visit to Cho University in Japan as a patent attorney, how she was able to garner professional capabilities in teaching and gaining an intercultural understanding in a country which is so different from India. And then we had Commonwealth advisor on higher legal education and a constitutional law expert, the former dean in South Africa, Professor Louis Franceschi, who said that in India, what he saw was an incredible experience teaching law, wonderful reception, challenging questions. He says that Indian youth have got power. So such is the positive context in which India is already open. And traditionally, India believed, from the Rig Veda I'm quoting, where it said, let noble thoughts come from everywhere. So we were always a country which believed, like the Upanishadic tradition of interaction, sitting closer, clearing doubt, dialoguing with the differences, and then enriching ourselves through that, and also finding the common denominator of oneness of humankind. Now, we also have a very interesting student testimonial where a student who enters the portals of this college as a kind of little hesitant to do law degree, but then he got adjusted to the environment. In the very first year, he had the opportunity of attending a semester abroad. And he said that this internationalization, along with his engagement with foreign faculty, foreign buddies as students, was the interaction which gave him exposure to different parts of the world. This student, Avichal Srivastav, today pursuing his higher studies in air traffic management in one of the British universities, talks about how student exchange programs beyond that in Ireland and even in Germany gave him the opportunity to learn with his peer group globally and strengthen his knowledge about various streams of law. Now, this is how little dabblings in different of exposure of law students, legal education institutions, and faculty, and receiving the faculty from those parts of the world which have different types of legal system, like Claire's case, enriches in both ways. That is the kind of theme that I'm going to address today. Now, the broad overview of my interaction with you is going to talk about why there is a need for revolution in legal education, how internationalization of higher education in general, which our new education policy is also harping upon, is to be understood in terms of the W questions and H question. and then how internationalization of legal education is very unique, and what are the different approaches to internationalization of higher education, and what is the trajectory of our experience at Symbiosis Law School, Pune, being part of Symbiosis International University, which has internationalization in its founding as well as DNA, and what are the challenges that we face in internationalizing legal education in particular, and what is the unfinished agenda that we have in front of us. So permit me, first of all, to talk about this idea of internationalization and internationalization of legal education. Now, most of us think that internationalization is about adding color on the campus. I submit that it is not just adding color, because internationalization of higher education is about integration. It is not just about having colors side by side. Through the prism of the idea of oneness of humankind, we see these colors. So when do we bring these colors together, integrated to find the common denominator, is the search that we see in internationalization. So finding these commonalities, finding the grounds for comparison, and also finding how we are responsive to the new realities where people's lives are dispersing as the diaspora, as the migrants, or people's lives are touched by international influences even though they haven't left home, and also about increasing trade relations between countries with the onset of globalization. You all would agree with me that globalization has resulted in the post-1995 era and liberalization as well in a kind of what we call as integration of systems. It is not just integration of systems of flow of capital, flow of people, and flow of knowledge. It is also a kind of search for global law and global justice. So resolving, not only in resolving disputes, but also in trying to appreciate and understand legal philosophies, in trying and appreciating the legal systems, in trying to, if not command, in trying to correlate different legal systems. Therefore, internationalization of higher education, which has been always there for decades together, where the advanced countries of the world had universities enriching with international students coming there, whereas post-colonial countries like India and most of the Asian countries having legal systems, which indigenous legal systems and indigenous approaches to higher education with internationalization undergoing a kind of eclipse because of the political changes, is the reality in which we are looking at it. Now, those countries which were having established universities much before India had in the post-colonial period, probably 2 centuries earlier to us, or sometimes 3 centuries earlier to us, had structured this higher education internationalization process. So it was about integrating the international dimension, intercultural dimension, global dimension. I will be talking about it, how it is in terms of ethos, in terms of ecosystem, in terms of process, and it is also a response to global academic environment. So you would have seen in the 60s and 70s and 80s, the migration in terms of students, migration in terms of faculty, migration facilitated through fellowships and scholarships, which gave exposure to the other side of the globe to most of the leading Indian academics and students, and also those who were seeking employment. So higher education became that kind of facilitator and a catalyst. Now we have an era where India is an equal participant globally. So it is a legal profession which is going to structure these kinds of interactions. It is a legal profession which is called to serve at the treaty negotiation or at the body legal entities or individual kind of interest negotiations. And is our legal profession geared through our legal education to address these needs? Or is there a need for all our law students to have an international exposure? So such questions are to be addressed in the light of internationalization of legal education. So India being a receptive of global capital, India being a country which is providing huge human resources, and India geared up for a future where more than 60% of the demography is going to be young population till 2030, are we really gearing our current lawyers and future lawyers to be at these kinds of negotiations, to be at these kinds of prevention of dispute, facilitation of dispute resolution, anticipation, or even resolving dispute beyond the question of conflict of jurisdiction or conflict of court? When you ask that question, internationalization of legal education is about training professionals to global environment in its multi-dimensional facet and contributing to global harmony, which is the general purpose of internationalization of higher education, but particularly in our profession, which always deals with creating a framework for behavior, for interests, for rights, for expectations, for preventing conflicts, for resolving problems. So we contribute to global harmony, to global understanding, to global peace with legal pluralism, not just confined to state ground kind of legal system concentrated education, but legal pluralism in all the facets of legal education, which includes curriculum, teaching practice or pedagogy, in our assessment, in our skills training, in our values, in global justice dimension, in looking at global common resources or spaces such as the spaces of migration, climate change, pandemic related issues, civil rights, maritime and space law, among others. I hope I have made it very clear in setting the stage for understanding of internationalization of higher education and internationalization of legal education. Now, this begs the question, what exactly is the need for internationalization? Why did our national education policy also emphasize on it? Aside from our heritage of being home to very important universities, which attracted scholars from all over the world, which also gave original thought like that of Kautilya, both in Takshashila and Nalanda, what are the other reasons in the current reality to emphasize internationalization? One is we want internationalization. Why? Because we want to reflect goals, objectives, and strategic plans in the world which is globalizing. Second, why do we need internationalization and where? We need it, concretely speaking, in our program of study and in our areas of research, where we are training lawyers for the future, where we are training multidimensional, versatile legal professionals for the future. How do we achieve this internationalization? We have to achieve it through different approaches and projects which have value, which is established, outcome which is proven in other avenues of internationalization, whether it is medical profession, with which we always have parallels, whether it is easily translatable skills like technology or science, or if we are talking about something like management or economics or information technology. Now, how is the outcome of the internationalization looking like? What is the outcome? The outcome will be in building the capability in our students, in our lawyers, in our teachers, in our researchers, in terms of skills which are required as global skills, in terms of cross-cultural sensitization, which is very important, where we go beyond the boundaries of our mind in thinking of other cultures as the other, in distancing from them, in better integration and correlation, in market readiness for now and for future, and in sustaining it in terms of integrating the best practices from everywhere and taking this whole movement forward. So that should be the outcome of internationalization. Let me tell you that I was introduced to internationalization of legal education in my tenure at Mangalore when I started as a law teacher. And at that time, we had for an exception, a student from Tibet and a student from South Africa. And although they were integrating in the landscape of Mangalore with very spicy diet, with only English as the communicative language aside from Hindi and regional language, there was no very strategic way of integrating. You live like us, you be one of us. Indian kind of indirect idea which was there, and they had to read the same Indian laws, same Indian curriculum, and there was no single attempt made for them even to write an assessment or a research in terms of how would they correlate it to their domestic legal system or to their domestic experience. I'm talking about early 90, pre-globalization India. So I have heard the data from, or I have read the data from other parts of India also, the universities which were emerging in terms of internationalization avenue were also looking at Indianizing the international students, and they would go and use these essence of what they have learned in the jobs that they got in their own country. Many of them have reached the levels of becoming ministers, like our former student is important advisor of His Holiness Dalai Lama. So this could have happened. But what we are looking at is today the world is more and more borderless, facilitated by technology, by communication, which at one point in time in the early part of 19th century also ushered in international relations in a strong way. But today's world has made us, and with the pandemic time highlighting it better, that you could be at home with the world. It is not just a philosophical statement anymore, it's a concrete reality. So in such reality, when we are looking at legal education, how does it look like? In the mid-90s, when I came to National Law School, Bangalore as a faculty, I saw that there were Fulbright scholars, there were very strong MOUs between NLSU and others, and there was a very good outflow of lead students from NLSU as Rhodes Scholars. Now, this was also looking at indicators of how many, how do they teach, what do they teach. But what I found very interesting in strategic focus was that professors coming from there, from whether it is from Ireland or from UK, and the professor from India would enter the same class and teach the same concept with two different perspectives. So I saw for the first time that there was a kind of interaction which was enriching the knowledge of students, where student was in focus, knowledge was in focus, and content enrichment was in focus. Still, there was no kind of metric to measure the impact of this faculty's visit or the impact on students or their feedback. It was kind of abstract impact left to each one's way of absorbing it. Coming from a city which was highly internationalized, Mangalore, being the headquarters of Basel Mission, having a German language in my CV, I was finding it quite perplexing, because I did not see, being a science graduate, I always wanted to look at how the system is, how the measurement is. So I did not see that metric, but I did see a few criteria in my experience in National Law School, Bangalore, and the way the students were very happy with these international faculty, because their curiosity, they were stimulated to learn about something which they did not know. The young are always full of this kind of adventure, curiosity, openness. So that was enriched. Then in my stint in Ireland, I realized how the European projects were facilitating trans-border learning through the Erasmus programs. And through Erasmus, a student from Germany would come to Ireland to learn. Aside from adjusting to the Commonwealth culture or common law culture, the student was also adjusting to English language. So there was a cultural learning which was measured, and there was also subject-related learning which was measured. So this student at the end of the class would ask me, what is the similarity I see between India and Ireland? And I would have hundreds of things to say about directive principles of state policy, about our common colonial past. So this kind of a critical evaluative learning alongside cross-cultural competence and the kind of teaching competence that is required to handle such situation that I learned there. Then we did between Indian universities and Western universities in terms of understanding human rights relevance in the European context to India. Also, we were looking at more in terms of creating knowledge, facilitating students to travel between borders, and facilitating teachers to travel between borders. Trans-border knowledge sharing or trans-border knowledge creation with the commonness of experience and searching for new methodologies of addressing real legal problems was still not coming into legal education. It only happened in last few years with our lawyers being recognized world over, with our judges making into International Court of Justice, our lawyers making into consultative roles in UK and other places. our country getting a place of prominence in international negotiation tables, that time has come of age for us to focus on internationalization of legal education in a very systematic, serious way. So what will be the aspects of internationalization of legal education in that case? So we will have to look at legal education as an education in service of justice, and justice as a face of love or human happiness, as one of the judges in US said, Justice Powell. So from that point of view, legal education is part of higher education as a professional education. Legal education is state grounded. It has the limits of territoriality. We have to look at our legal education in terms of educating lawyers as professionals, benchmarked with quality dimensions which have come from Bologna process in EU, or in Australia, the EQUIT process, or what we see in US as Carnegie report. So what is the common denominator that we have? Carnegie report said that time has come for us to look at legal profession at par with the medical profession, because the commitment to public service in medical profession with the compulsory housemanship, or the commitment of medical profession to professionalism in addressing the problems, and the way in which that profession has been organized at different levels, at levels of general practice, at levels of specialists, consultants, or even in terms of organizing their services, how they have used management principles, technology, whether time has come for us to do that. So this is exactly where we wanted to look at legal education within Symbiosis International University and in late Dr. Menon's initiative in terms of across India in different aspects of faculty development, or in lead universities like other universities which have internationalization in focus, private and public domain. We started looking at these quality benchmarks. Fortunately for us, Bar Council has provided a curriculum which is very, very flexible if one is venturing to do that, if one's university allows to do that. Therefore, within that, if I go by these three aspects, the other unique aspect is international influences on legal education. As I gave you the example of these different experiences, and in Symbiosis International University, thanks to founder and pro-chancellor's engagement in internationalization, Dr. Vidya's own passion about internationalization, giving us that space in evolving this idea of metrics or measurement of influence of internationalization and aiming for QS ranking, and our continued leadership and engagement in International Association of Law Schools, resulting in a blueprint of a document called International Accreditation and Quality Checking. So this is the international influence we have received. So we created specialization groups where law schools from across India came in our 2017's Global Law Deans Meet. And this resulted in a kind of new experiments in internationalization, which I will quickly tell you. Then the fifth dimension in terms of unique aspect is paradigm shift of the legal field, which I already mentioned, from being only state grounded or being Mofussil grounded or High Court grounded to becoming international and transnational. Today, a lawyer in a Mofussil town like Udupi, which is situated in West Coast Karnataka, will come across a case of a Somalian pirate who is traced in the West Coast, in the Arabian Sea. Or a lawyer sitting in Cochin will have to learn about Enrica Lex legal dimensions. So this is how the international and transnational influences are shaping the local law practice. And there is a person who has suffered in the family law case who hails from a locality and migrates across the country and then undergoes domestic violence in another jurisdiction, from where she flees with her children. And then in India, her husband comes and files for custody battle. So this is how global legal dimensions are affecting India. Or there is a deal where headquarters of the company is in India, branches in Germany, and there is a conflict about somebody who is not making the payment, where the person who is owing these dues is situated somewhere in Thailand. So there are these transnational questions coming into an activity which was planned and executed in India, but there were other elements, what we study in conflict of law or private international law. And there is, because of this, there is a challenge of incorporating massive pedagogical and content overhaul. If you look at the statistics, large percentage of Indians who migrate for higher studies in law go to England, go to Germany, go to US. Whether our way of credit systems and other things are aligning with their credit systems, and are we defining them in a marks card? Thanks to the UGC initiative, now we have it. But then all the law schools are not yet geared for that. This is something what we call as credit equivalence that we need to be geared for the future. Now, coming to the approaches to internationalization and their significance, first of all, we have to look at the activities. Activities could include academic activities in terms of unique programs and process in terms of unique programs, and also in terms of identifying unique projects. These projects could be funded by those countries' funding agencies, or they could be funded by Indian government, or a joint venture like we have the Fulbright Fellowship, Fulbright Nehru Fellowship. So these are the kinds of activities that we have to constantly research and plan for the development of a faculty, for opportunity for students. Some of them can afford. We had a student in whose case he could not pay all the money, so we raised funds from donors and we facilitated him. He was able to start his law practice within 2 months of qualifying from the college. And today his annual turnover is much better than somebody who is working in a law firm within 3 years of starting the practice. So international exposure gives bright students the brighter opportunity, and it stimulates them. It gives them a lot of ideas. Therefore, planning such activities. Secondly, the process where you have a policy framework, where you do it merit-based, you do it personality-based with the criteria such as language, even the practical dimensions like having a passport or a reason by which visa is not denied. So you have to have this kind of a process approach where you also have a policy framework of the steps and the flow chart. Third is the ethos approach, where you have a belief system which believes that world, like we have in Symbiosis, world is one family, which believes that people from all cultures are welcome here. That was traditional Indian mindset, that India was always considering guests as gods. So that openness to other culture, as Gandhi said, I would keep my windows open for the winds from all directions to blow, but I wouldn't be swept off my feet. So personally, I always feel that this ethos is about finding the commonality, respecting everybody, and being what we call as internationalism as a value, that human concerns, human pain, human compassion, and human beauty is borderless. But at the same time, the culture in which we are rooted, the nation state which has paid for our development, also needs to be respected. And as Gandhi said, not to be swept off my feet by any of those winds which are blowing from all directions. So the belief system and support to such perspectives, and the competency approach, that what I said, measuring the change or paying attention to the change. Because I have these case studies of Avichal, or the case study of this boy that I mentioned, who's a minority student who was able to make it big. So inculcation of these skills, norms, values, attitudes, and knowledge among all the prominent stakeholders. For example, when we held IALS Law Deans meet, we had the Bar Council of India chairman invited, we had Chief Justice of India then speaking, we had Judges Council as part of that, which had judges from Europe and America, and Indian judges, we had plenty of them from Bombay and Pune. And then here we were looking at how inculcating this appreciation with the stakeholders, the conversations, those conversations led to great friendships also between judges, between lawyers. So how do you see that, and how each of these activities forms smallest unit of internationalization? I'm looking at these approaches. It's a huge scholarly area with scholars like Altpa, Jane Knight, Einer, Hans de Wit, Aram, Van de Vende, and our own Dr. Vidya Ravdekar, who have focused on these approaches. Now, coming to internationalization of legal education, which is the soul of our today's discussion, how do we look at indicators if legal education has been internationalized or not? We've got a number of scholars who have focused on that. In 2014, there was a very important book published about internationalization of legal education by a scholar called William Keenagem, and Kenegem, along with Mary Hiscock and our own Sandeep Gopalan, the Rhodes Scholar from National Law School, who is currently Vice Chancellor in one of the American universities. Earlier, he was in Deakin, who focused on areas like Gopalan on Ireland, and Mary and William across the globe had invited articles focusing on how Europe is looking at it, Australia is looking at it, and how each country is looking at it in terms of internationalization. So what we found there was 4 different areas where internationalization need to focus. And these 4 different areas can be captured in terms of what we call as, this is the unfinished agenda, dealing with different national philosophies of legal education. How does China look at legal education, which is home to 1/5 of the humankind? How does India look at legal education? What are the national philosophies? How do the US on both sides of the Atlantic, they look at legal education? So national philosophy. Secondly, we have a divide that if you look at Canada, US or India or some of the countries which were erstwhile colonized, they have a common law approach, which looks at what is decided in the past, precedents as the source of law. But if you look at the continental Europe influenced legal systems, they look at code-based interpretation of law, where earlier decisions need not be followed as mandatory, no stare decisis rule. So we have to move to the brave new world where we look at legal systems as they are, and we apply the law to arrive at justice, and therefore gear up legal education for such brave new world in terms of focusing on problem solving. So the lawyering there will have to ignore this kind of artificial divide between civil law and common law, because in Arabic countries, I have seen that some countries follow strictly the French law, some countries or the French law logic, even though they are applying Sharia, and some countries may have a mix of different laws between their religious law and between their non-religious dimensions law. So we'll have to understand it in that situation. Therefore, students should be given such real life experience. Then evolving initiatives. Thirdly, evolving initiatives in legal education for global practice. What kind of initiative? Now, when I when students approach me for recommendation letter, I ask them, what's your goal? So how are you looking at achieving that goal? Then some of them who are brilliant, have the capacity to crack bar exam in the first go in US, I encourage them to do that so that they can work from Indian law firm, or they can find a work there, whereby it would enrich the capability of Indian lawyers to work on global issues. Then international practice, attorneys' insights to come in. I get a lot of attorneys to speak to students. A lot of our alumni also have become attorneys from India across, and their insights also inspire. We have a specialized course on global legal skill and litigation and arbitration in terms of international advocacy. So these authors have highlighted these possibilities. But it was Michael Cooper, the late Michael Cooper, the former dean of Australian National University, who spoke about the 10 indicators, to which I have added one more indicator from what we learned during the COVID crisis. Now, here the indicators, first of all, as I already told you, developing the curriculum. So developing the curriculum doesn't mean separate courses. We have a Bar Council prescribed curriculum, but Bar Council also gives us flexibility to create an honors program, to provide a basket of electives. So within those electives, can we have a comparative kind of approach, or within each course, can we have a focus 10 to 25% on different jurisdictions of the world, or case studies which have a bearing on different jurisdictions of the world? So this is the first indicator. Second is language and cross-cultural competence. We could offer foreign languages. They say that if you know Spanish, you have key to 1/5 of the world. If you have Mandarin, also Chinese language or Japanese language, Hindi, for example. I mean, many people who come to us as international students, we put them through Hindi or Sanskrit. So give them that kind of cross-cultural competence. Why should it always be determined by the countries which have already had internationalized legal education? Why not us also inculcate that in the new generation of migrant students? Student exchange and mobility on both ways. Today, what we see is, compared to the students going from India for a semester abroad, students coming from there is much less. Now, this could be encouraged now with the technology, where we have had international students coming to common programs. We had students from Singapore also register to some of our programs. Because in Singapore, the interest of the students is to study about other legal systems. Even Indian students are very much open-minded about it. But what we did not see that is in the advanced countries, where they will confine it to those who are interested. There's no compulsion or anything like that. Now, the fourth indicator is how you benchmark your education globally. Now, that we have been doing, and many law schools have been doing in some ways, but that comprehensive internationalization is something that we need to really work. We are far away from there. And how far our faculties are having international citizenship, international exposure. We call it as varied student and faculty profile. What percentage of our students, minimum percentage that is expected is 2 to 7%. So international QS ranking depends on that. What are the career opportunities in professional practice, mentoring, online dimensions? I'm adding this online enrichment because that's what we experienced during COVID. For us, COVID became not a challenge, but an opportunity. The next one is research collaboration. How many joint reports, joint articles, friendship between faculty? I was told in my Fulbright visit that most fructifying dimension of internationalization happened where there is a very close friendship between faculty. We have that experience in our own institution with one of our professors who is a polyglot, who has been instrumental in bringing the German collaboration. And beyond that, it became very strong with the European collaboration. Visiting faculty programs, customized student programs. How many visiting faculty as scholars in residence are engaged? We had a very good opportunity of a Cornell-trained attorney who was a Fulbright in Symbiosis Law School in 2007. To this day, she comes every alternative year, online or offline, to teach a course on legal skills. So this kind of bonding, this kind of facilitation and policy by the university is something that helps everybody. We had it in the National Law School as well. Customizing student programs in such a way that whatever they earn in international curriculum. For example, we are the pioneers in India in starting European Union legal studies as a small certificate program way back in 2008. European delegation in EU delegation in India supported us, German embassy supported us. Our existing Erasmus program, first in the country on legal consortium globally with Brazil, Portuguese, and other universities being part of it, supporting us. We started this certificate program, building on the international faculty who are here and some of us who are trained in European law. So today it has become, with another project support, a kind of master's program, a compulsory basket of courses in undergrad and postgrad across all our law schools. So this is how we customize a student program. And then we have outreach, which is local or international, where project-based learning could be on European law, it could be on American law, it could be on African law, Southeast Asian, or SAARC. And here, faculty acting as mentors for students who come from outside, finding a mentor faculty for students who go from India, and locally students acting as buddies. In our case, this buddy system has also resulted in a kind of beautiful exchange between families, and one of them ended up marrying her buddy as well. So this is the kind of cultural enrichment, exclusive experiences, which tell the story of how internationalization results in a rich world, not only in rich learning and rich legal practice. Institutional network, how far you are members of these various international associations. There is a broad association of law school deans, there is association of law and social specialists, there is association of human rights specialists, there is legal consortiums, there are project-based funded legal consortiums globally and regionally. There are fellowship opportunities for excellent faculty. I was talked about Fulbright Fellowship. There is a recent fellowship with the Emory University on a chair. So this is how new fellowships are emerging. We have a lot of fellowships coming from Germany. India itself sponsoring ICCR chair in Germany, for example. So how far are we members of this? Are we really building on this? So I thought I will share this as an idea, as a concept, and as an information. Now, once again, coming back to our approach, when I'm integrating internationalization approach of all these Jane Knight and Alba and Dr. Vidya, when I'm putting it in the mapping of internationalization of legal education, it's very important, the activities which I mentioned to you, the process where we try to have a flow chart of activities and timeline and when we want to achieve, what we want to achieve, what is our immediate milestone or short-term goal, long-term goal, and the ethos which we encourage, and the competencies that we create. Now, this is a challenge. If a student, I mean, usually in our student group, even though we attract quite reasonably good socioeconomic bracket, there are some who undergo financial shocks. This time it has been more due to COVID. In such cases, how do we have support system? So we have internationally with these scholars a concept called internationalization at home. So internationalization at home gives that kind of dabble in internationalization in terms of all these approaches. When an institution has that culture, and when we build on what we call as COIL, collaborative online international learning, which we did with the research projects on contract law with Zimbabwe, French and Bhutan and American University and Symbiosis as part of it. We have tried to do it between Indian students as well. We have tried to do it with the faculty. So mapping of these approaches, now when England is coming out of, UK is coming out of European Union with the Brexit, how learning European Union law as a core program is changing there. But then what they are looking at is in internationalization of legal education debate. There are a lot of law firms which still have cases, which still have interactions. So the debate that comes here for us also, which is relevant for us also in defining our unique approach in international arena, and as lawyers facilitating that, what is nice to have and what we need to have. I think today internationalization of legal education is something that we need to have. It is not just about color, it is about enriching ourselves. So with that, I would just like to give you a little insight on what are the challenges in our trajectory of internationalization, which I was giving as an example interspersed with my discussion, theoretical discussion, because of the want of time. Now, one of the challenges we faced was we have more than 60 memoranda of understanding. Now we also are in a better position. We are looking at only those who are above 500 in within 500 in QS ranking or within 200 in the Times ranking. We need to materialize these MOUs. Sometimes MOUs remain in paper, so we call it as broad collaboration. So how do we make it achieve comprehensive outcome on the basis of the 10 indicators I told you? That's one challenge. Second is lack of human resource, which can look at funding and projects being a self-financed university, or even for state universities, government needs to encourage. I was reading about, I met a scholar, Japanese government investing on scholars to learn the Chinese international law and international approaches. We need to strengthen this kind of a think tank, which we did earlier. We need to continue that. Lack of support, cumbersome regulatory processes. We need to look at joint degree, dual degree, and look at better intellectual exchange in the legal field. We had the Chevening scholarship, etc., but we had it discontinued. We need to continue that. Today, we have dominant metric of measuring coming from the dominant internationalized universities. We need to look at it in India-focused courses. How international students don't come here to learn contract law from Anson, but they come here to learn how contract principles existed in the Vedic period or in ordinary people's lives, because only 10% are bound by, or they consider, or they have awareness of connecting to the law. How do the rest of the population live? So we expose these international students to law in a developing context with poverty and law, with legal systems, implementation. How do we look at rehabilitation, etc.? So India-focused courses and projects, approval from multiple agencies to be simplified. And we are sure that new education policy is going to give that. And we need to have more sensitization of faculty and students to be more appropriate, to create cultural competence, cross-cultural competence and sensitization to international faculty. Our systems to be safer, hygienic and diversity accommodating in terms of their special conditions, maybe medical condition or cultural condition, to be sensitive when we are exposing them. Just because we like something need not be that they like it. So being that open makes us to be better in our own relationship with our own people, because India also is full of such diversity. Therefore, the challenge for us to look at is the transition from adding color to becoming impactful, to becoming outcome-based. So when we braved COVID-19 also, this challenge was lingering on. Therefore, today I end my discussion with you by bringing to your attention the need for becoming a cosmopolitan law school, all Indian law school to be facilitated by Bar Council of India in putting those criteria of whether this law school is cosmopolitan in terms of its outcome in responding to globalization. Don't call it internationalization if you don't want to, but you can always look at what we call in law and justice in globalizing world in terms of cosmopolitan approach, which is going beyond the nation grounded kind of narrow view, and also at the same time bringing the best practices and searching for common denominators. There's an open curriculum that we have, which could be encouraged to bring more internationalization at home by use of technology, COIL, and other enabling programs, a kind of knowledge sharing, practice sharing, and participation in the programs of various law schools, which are at different levels of internationalization by students. These law schools could act as satellite with other law schools which do not have such opportunity, to give such opportunity, to create a repository of information on internationalization levels, internationalization opportunities from all these 10 indicators that I shared with you. Thank you very much for this opportunity. If India wants to lead its education to the highest level with the new opportunity created with new education policy, which is looking at research, regional consolidation, and interdisciplinarity. If we want to see India as a destiny of internationalization of higher education and legal education in particular, and as a guru to revive its past as a crucible of global legal skills and community legal care, and law and justice in a different context needs to be evolved. So I also urge all the law schools and regulators to look at internationalism as a value in people, as a value for peace and solidarity, and for quality and excellence. As the tagline of our own institution, Symbiosis, echoes in its Golden Jubilee year, Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, that all the world is one family. At this outset, I thank the research support by my colleagues, Dr. Mohanty, Dr. Arya, and our own Dr. Vidya Eravdekar, various fellowships, friends, and Symbiosis, and all the friends across the world, as much as friends of our profession. Thank you, one and all.